Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Good morning, and welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. Isn't that what we all want? I mean, if you were to say in the end what you would hope that you had accomplished in this life, is not that the summation of it? To have crafted a meaningful life? That it meant something that you were here, that you left something behind, and that something was better because you were here. That alone gives your life meaning. And that's why we gather together. Today is episode number 282. I'm close coming to that 300 point. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll be done. Or maybe I'll keep going. I didn't ever know how long I was going to do this podcast. I just knew that at least for now, I had something to say. And it seems like I find people and come up with people all the time that I'm so enthralled by what the life that they have crafted that I want to share it with you. Today, it's just me, just you and me. And probably I should talk about like this craziness. This is not my usual scenario. And right over there, I can see my usual leopard chair that I sit in. It's still wrapped in plastic. It's laying on its side. So about 5 weeks ago, I looked at the possibility of moving out of my little tiny Spanish Fork town into Salt Lake, where I really drove every single day of my life. But I loved where I lived in my little town. A friend of mine said, there's a house coming up for sale. You should come and look at it. It's just around the corner from me. And this is not just any friend. This is a dear friend. And I thought, I don't want to move, blah, blah. And she said, come look. I went like, oh, okay, fine. So we went and looked. And it immediately felt like home to me. It was all single level living, which as I age, which will be happening sometime. I don't know when, but sometime. that could be important to me. It's close to John. John lives about a half a mile from here. And just like that, I decided to do it. And I put my earnest money offer down and we went. And this is a podcast about the lessons of a move. And what I learned and what I had the chance to reflect on and look on. I didn't realize when I started into this, what incredible journey and opportunity that it was going to be for me to look at my life, to reflect within, to take the chance to see, have I crafted a meaningful life? And what takes to craft the next part? So this is the less reflections of my lifetime. And I hope that in doing this, that it might provide for you the opportunity for you to kind of also do that, to reflect upon your lifetime and where you are right now in crafting a meaningful life. And I began to look at and ponder the smaller lessons and also the bigger lessons that were contained within the move of my home. So that's probably the number one lesson that I had from this move, when it was a tremendous opportunity to reflect on my personal growth. So even though you may not be moving, what I'm hoping is that you will create a move in your own life as you reflect upon this week, that you will imagine your own personal move and what that would be like if you were to move your home, what you would choose to take, what you would discard, what would be there. Would there be meaning? Would there be joy? Would there be sadness? Would there be progress from point A to point B? I think the progress is the biggest thing that I learned. Because it's not that I am like, okay, here I have arrived at my meaningful life. That's not what this podcast is about. But it is about the process of crafting that life. Someone recently said to me, Mary, I hardly ever see you use anymore your hashtag of badass woman with a purpose, grace, and grit. why don't you use that anymore? And I realized that I'd kind of quit using that. It's not that I'm opposed to it. It's not that I'm ashamed of it. It's not that I no longer embrace it in my life as being full of purpose and being, as I offer myself grace, that I can offer more grace, still tears, that I can offer more grace to others. And it's not that I'm still not about grit and being able to make a commitment and to stick to it. It's just that I no longer need to prove it. Can you come to a point where you no longer have to prove who you are? That you know who you are? That's one of the great things that came to me in this move, that I had moved past needing to prove it to having proved it or having accomplished it or having embraced it as who I am rather than who I want to be, and to actually sit back and say, oh, I like this life I've crafted. I mean, I launched a whole new company after I retired from culinary crafts, and I started that hashtag. I started this podcast. I climbed Kilimanjaro. I published my first book. I found my soulmate in John. I started a new career in life coaching and business coaching and motivational speaking. I think that's a lot because it's not even 5 years yet since I've retired. And so I no longer have to prove anything. I don't have to shout to the world, hey, check this out. This is a badass, right? Are y'all agreeing on that? I don't have to do that anymore. I get to just simply claim that I'm about crafting a meaningful life and let my life show that. I get to say that the most important piece of my life now is living in oneness with all of you. And I let my life show that commitment. I don't need to do a YouTube video, or I don't need to do a social media video that shows me dancing wildly to know that I've lived a wild life, that I'm brave and vulnerable. I have shown it in my life that I've lived. And that gratitude for having done that filled me as I began the packing process. One of the things I became very aware of was the generational gratitude that I had for the generations that brought me here. Because my mother was very much into legacy of things. And I don't have many things from her that were just writings, things that she wrote. But she kept things that tied her to the generation before and the generation before that. I inherited most of those. And so in this move, I had to look at each one and say, is this a thing? Does this connect me to my generations? Is this something that was of value to her, so it's of value to me? But then the next question, will it be of value to my children? And it's on that basis that I made the determinations of what to keep. I outflowed a lot of knickknacks that she had saved. I gave her wedding dress to my daughter, and the wedding dress of my first marriage to my daughter, who's making a quilt out of all these white dresses. What a beautiful legacy. I came across this photo that had been framed, and this person right here is my grandfather. And so that means that my grandfather is probably, if he were alive today, would be about 150. And so this photo was taken probably, looks to be 10 to 12, taken about 140 years ago. It was important enough to my mom to keep it and to put it in this frame and to give it to me because she wanted to be connected to these people. It made the cut of coming to my new house. Sometimes when I look at the photos of old people, and particularly of the women, I become keenly aware. And when you look at paintings of people from previous centuries, they're never smiling. That's why the Mona Lisa was so profound, because she was smiling, a slight smile. People did not smile. That was thought of as a negative thing if you smiled in a painting. All of these people look incredibly somber. Some look angry, some look sad. I don't mind taking a photo that looks reflective, but I never take a photo where I look angry or just like, who? That's not how I want to be remembered, but that's how these people want to be remembered. And the joy that it is now to be able to show emotion. That was for me the biggest lesson as I came across this photo, was the joy of showing emotion. In so many generations past, they did not allow themselves to show emotion. Sadness or happiness, you showed no emotion. That meant you were weak if you showed emotion. And for me, that's the journey, is that I have learned that my greatest strength is in showing emotion. A lesson from the move. And that I want to make sure that I always am a real person with real emotions on my face. When I'm hurting, I want to show hurt. When I'm happy, I want everyone to know it. That's how we create empathy with each other, is we see emotions. It's how we create vulnerability with each other, by showing our true and genuine emotions. Not a made-up social media video, but real emotions. And to see the journey of crafting a meaningful life, from how they thought what made a great profile to what we see now. I laugh, I cry, I do everything. I share crazy, vulnerable stuff on this podcast because it makes me real to me, and it makes me real to you. Yeah. I talked about, as I moved, I would look and think, do I need this? When I opened my utensil drawer, now having been a chef and having been a caterer for 35 years, I have a lot of stuff in my kitchen. These 50 boxes that are going to go in this space are really more than what can fit in this space. And this is after I trimmed down. I did not bring a third of what I thought was important and collected in my home with me. A third of it I was able to outflow. And the greatest example I have of this are the wooden spoons. When it came time to choose what was coming utensil-wise, I opened my drawer and I counted. I had 12 wooden spoons in my drawer. I thought, now how often do you use 12 wooden spoons? Never. But I kept them because somebody had given them to me, or I had just over the years bought a different one or a different size. And I took them out, I laid them out, and I thought, what are the three that I use the most, that are the most valuable to me? I gathered those three, put them in the packing box, and discarded the rest. So you might wonder, what does that have to do with a podcast about crafting a meaningful life? For me, it is that so many times in my life, I have chosen quantity over quality. And as I looked at those wooden spoons laying out, I realized the fact that I had 12 spoons in my drawer seemed like an accomplishment and something that I wanted to keep. But I never used them, and they really weren't adding to my life. They were just taking up space in my life. And I was able to choose the ones that were of greatest value to me, that were quality. Through the month, 3 weeks that I spent packing my home, I had an opportunity to look at how much of my life is filled with quantity things and not quality. If you were to look at the calendar on my phone, you would just some of you might pass out. Some of you might have the same calendar and think that I have value because there's so much quantity on my calendar. but what do I have there that's quality? And what am I going to choose that's going to continue to bring quality to my life? I think as we move through life and get a little older, we realize that we don't have time or energy for everything. In fact, we never did. And to think that you do is probably one of those fun lies that we tell ourselves. I can do it all. I will make time for it. I will just sleep less or whatever it is. And now I'm learning the lessons of quality. I want you to learn that lesson as well. It's not about quantity of things you do in your life, but the quality that it's going to make a difference in your life. And then, of course, a difference in the lives of others. And I had to make decisions of what was of value to me, not just the piles of thank you notes that I wanted to keep. I had so many thank you notes from my 35 years in business and truly meaningful thank you notes about how I had, done something really wonderful for this person and so on. And as I just first started to read every one, then realized that was ridiculous, and then just kind of skimmed through them, I ended up in the pile of garbage nearly every thank you note that I received from my 35 years in business. And I realized that what was over here were the thank you notes from my children and my grandchildren and a few close friends. That whole pile that meant so much to me because it was quantity and it put a stamp on the value of my life. But I didn't end up keeping them. I only kept these, the value of my family, my children, my grandchildren. I tried to always keep that in my mind during my career, but probably not much as I wish I had. So the regret is of no value to me. The great regret only has value when it changes to action in the future. Like I just finished, after we moved here, the very next day we left on a service mission to Mexico with one of my family, with my son and all of his wife and my 4 grandchildren. And I could have stayed and said, I'm not going to go. But rather than having this be the most important thing, spending time with them, I made a choice about crafting a meaningful life. I made a choice of value. In fact, the night before, I took an airborne fall off of a step stool when I was putting something away in my closet here. And I had an excuse not to go. But I didn't choose to use it. I chose to go. Because those treasured notes of my children and grandchildren were in my mind. And the pile that was in the garbage for my business. The packing seemed overwhelming at times. It seemed like I was never going to see the top of it. I was never going to be able to say, I'm finished. Every time I thought that I was finished with a room, I would walk back through it and I would be like, oh, well, what about that? I guess I have to unplug that clock and take it. And then what about those things that are hanging there? Are they coming? I was never done with any room until the movers finally closed the door. And at the last minute, I made decisions to go or not to go, to put in my car or to go to the garbage. And it was so overwhelming. But like life, I did just one cupboard at a time. You could see your life as completely overwhelming as you look at all that's in front of you. But in the end, I just took one cupboard at a time, one room at a time, and focused on it, and packed it, made my decisions, taped it up, put it ready to go. If I just kept looking at that huge piece, it was so overwhelming. But I knew that it was possible to pack this. Even on my own, it was possible. And I began to use the same strategy that I used when I was climbing Killy and when I did my major weight loss programs. You have a goal. And for me, it was to lose half of my body weight and over half of my body fat to become fit and healthy. With Killy, it was to get to the summit. That's the big, audacious goal. Getting this a complete house packed was the big, audacious goal. But in order to get there, I couldn't just every day just be overwhelmed with the goal and get discouraged. I had to break it down. I had to see what was the 100-yard goal. And I would say to myself, my goal today is not to lose 140 pounds. My goal is to lose 20 pounds. And when I got to that goal, I could rest. When I climbed Skilly, I would put that 100 yards out in front of me, and then I could take a sip of water and move on quickly. When I packed for the move, it was the same. I'm going to do this room today. Today and tomorrow. But right now, to get focused and started, I'm not going to think about the 8 hours it will take to pack this area. I'm going to think about that cupboard or that closet, and I'm going to finish it. And I'm going to keep my feet pointed in that direction until I finish that piece that I have set. That's how it is we accomplish all goals. The same way I got packed. One cupboard, one closet, one room at a time. To not let myself be overwhelmed by the huge house that faced me. I hope that's of little value to you. It's always been of great value to me that old adage, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. And eventually it's gone. What is it? What's that big audacious goal that's in front of you? And what's the one thing that you could do today that will move you forward? And ask that same question tomorrow morning. What's the thing that I will do today that will move me toward my goal? And what's my interim goal? If my goal is to start my own company, that's a big, audacious goal. What is it going to be today? What piece? And what does the short-term goal over there look like, the 100-yard goal? Well, I will have gotten my business license and I will have established a marketing plan. Okay, that's a good 100-yard goal. So let's get to it today. Whatever your dreams are, whatever you're dreaming, whatever you're wanting, you can have it and you can accomplish it. One footstep, one box, 1 pound at a time. Your vision and your purpose are what lead the way, always. I wrote them on Post-it notes and put them on my bathroom mirrors. Every goal that I have ever set, that I've ever accomplished, started that way. With 1 day, 1 pound, 1 box at a time. And you can accomplish everything. Another lesson I learned was the value of a champion. We've talked about having champions many times. Champions are more than cheerleaders. Cheerleaders cheer you when you're succeeding. And like, whoa, that was awesome. You did such a great job. You climbed Killy. That was awesome. Champions are people who are there for you when you're not succeeding. When maybe you didn't do your goal. Maybe it's less than perfect. And they still cheer you on because they know who you are. And they understand that you can do this. The value of having a champion, as I got ready to do this move, was invaluable to me. John was my biggest champion. And he would say, like, so, tell me about today. I was like, oh, I didn't get that full room done today. I only got this part done. He said, well, when we have that finished by? I think I can get it done tomorrow. Is tomorrow soon enough? Yeah, it is. I had another friend, my friend Katie Johnson. She said, how goes the move? She would ask me this all the time. I'm like, I'm still coming. I'm still coming. I'm still moving. And I had different people that would walk me through fears when I would be so afraid. My daughter, Megan, I was I had a lot of fear with this move. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And rather than listening to all my fears about my finances, she began to peel back the layers for me and say, what is that fear about? And what is that fear about? And what is that fear about? She was my champion, even in my fears. Find yourself a champion. Find yourself support. We are not meant to live this life in a vacuum by ourselves. You are not an island unto yourself, but we are part of a continent. So what I realized I needed to do was to be vulnerable. Now that is a lesson. Is that not a lesson you've heard on this podcast a gazillion times? To learn to be vulnerable, to not be afraid of being vulnerable, but to embrace it. I was afraid to be vulnerable with this move. I was afraid to ask for help. I got this. I'm going to do it. I have to decide what goes and what stays. And when I began to get overwhelmed and realized I wasn't going to make it, I had to ask for help. And then help came, and help was so wonderful. I decided I could go through a room pretty quickly and decide what I wasn't taking, and what was left, could be boxed. My daughter-in-law, Soraya, brought her children, and they came and they helped pack my kitchen. They helped pack my children's books. They took some, we outflowed others. I brought some here. It was wonderful to have them there. My dear, dear friend, Lori Otterstrom, came, packed my butler's pantry and my china hutch full of all my fine china and crystal and crazy 12-foot-high goblets, and she helped pack all of it. We thought it was going to take 4 hours and ended up taking 12. And she came back 3 days to do that. The value of feeling supported, that someone's blowing wind under your wings. There's nothing quite like that, to not feel that you are alone. Each of my children came, and my in-laws came to help with something. The day we pulled everything out of the crawl space, my food storage, all my Christmas decorations, my grandchildren worked in the hole and pushed it over to me. I pushed it up out of the crawl space. My son Ryan, grabbed nearly all of it and pulled it up. He's so strong not only physically, but emotionally and mentally. My other ones, Jen and everyone else, my daughter Megan and Clayton, they worked in the room we were putting it in to stack it and label it storage 2, storage 2, storage 2, pack, stack. I mean, we were an amazing assembly line, and I felt lifted because I was willing to be vulnerable and ask for help. Mom's not perfect. Mom needs help too. Hi, will you disconnect my TV? Hi, will you get my Tiffany lamp down and disconnect it? Hi, will you disconnect my computer so I can take it? Hi. I realized I needed so much help, and so many people helped. Ask for support in your life. You do not have to be a superwoman to be a warrior. I was a warrior every day of my move, but I didn't have to be Wonder Woman and do it all. I accomplished what I accomplished in a month because I was willing to be vulnerable and to say, I need help. What is it in your life that you need help with? What it would feel like to have someone embrace you, hold you, lift you, allow you to fly, rather than constantly trying to struggle so much on your own. In the beginning of this mood, every day I cried. I cried for leaving my home. For 30 years I was there. I designed and built the home. I lived there through 2 husbands, one for 28 years and one for a short time. That's another reason why this move was important, because if I was going to begin a new life with John, I needed a new beginning in a new home. And this is it. But I still cried. leaving behind my memories. When I would come up and visit my new home and I would see there was no yard, that's one of the reasons why I moved, because I wanted to get rid of that huge yard and the pool, so much upkeep. But when I came up here, I would just sit and cry. I'm like, where will my grandchildren play? How will they have fun coming to Grandma's? The last few times they came to my home in Spanish Fort, I would watch them outside running and laughing and being in the pool, and I would just think, that won't happen anymore. They won't come anymore. I began to have fears of what I was losing. Would I have enough money to afford this new home? I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to be 100 years old and kicked out of my home. Every day there was something new that I was afraid of. And finally I realized that my fears were no different in this move than that they had been my entire life. I was afraid that I wasn't enough. That people, my grandchildren and children, would want to come see me, not because of the house I lived in, but because of me and the bonds that we share as a family. I began to realize that I had been suddenly wrapped up with cords of fear again about scarcity, rather than believing in the abundance of the universe, and that the more I outflow, the more that will come back to me. I began to settle in to the beautiful life I had been living and let go of the fear that had grabbed a hold of me just the last month. I didn't want that. That I could sit back and rejoice in the rewards of my years of hard work. And that now in this new home, I will stand in my place of power and light. I'll stand in this new home with John. All good reasons to move here. They weren't reasons of forgetting the past, but embracing the future. And every time that I would see something that I was going to be letting go of, at first I would start to cry, but then I began to think, this is not losing something. This is something moving on to a new door. Those other doors are still all in my life, but I'm choosing a new door. Sometimes we are afraid to let go of what we've known in our life because we know how to deal with those problems. We know how to deal with all that stuff. And we're afraid to walk into a new life because we don't know what's over there. We don't know if we can handle that part. We know we can handle this part. Well, the thing is, that comes from choosing the new life. That comes from believing that you are a warrior. And that whatever comes, you have what it takes to deal with it. You can step in, not out of fear living over here, but step into what's new in your life. What are you going to be ready to embrace as a warrior? Not perfect, but a warrior. I'm learning to embrace the way of the peaceful warrior. I learned that on this trip to Mexico. I didn't have to be the badass warrior. I could find my way as a peaceful warrior. And I share this with you because I'm hoping that some of these lessons, as I found profound lessons of my life, might be lessons for you in your life right now. I didn't save those career things. I saved every moment of memories with my family. I finished packing about 8 hours before the movers arrived. And then they arrived. They moved for 15 hours that day to get me into this home. And the next morning I left for Mexico. Everything's still in plastic wrap. I came home just a day ago from Mexico to all of this. I'm a warrior, but I'm a peaceful warrior. I'm not attacking this like some bat out of hell. I'm attacking it the same way that I packed, one box at a time, one room at a time, and there'll be enough time for all. In just a few days, I leave for Wyoming to help my son. All of our family are going. He has a cabin he's building. We're going to help. And We're going to be together as a family. Now, I could make up and just simply say, I can't go, guys. I got to do this. But I'm choosing. I'm choosing what's of value to me. These boxes, hey, guess what? They're going to be here when I get home from Wyoming. They better be, because the next day we fly on our big trip, the one that was planned. I belong to an organization called Sapria, which deals with childhood sexual abuse. And the woman who is on the board with me is a travel agent. And she was donating all of her profits from this particular trip if we signed up and went. And I love that idea of being able to do this wonderful trip in Europe while donating and supporting Sapria. So I leave the very next day. After this podcast, I'm packing my bag for Wyoming and John's. And I'm also packing my bags for Europe, because when I get back, there won't be time to do them. I feel like my life is a little bit in shambles, but I'm not going to get stressed about it, because I'm living the way of the peaceful warrior. And the peaceful warrior is always enough, always has enough time and space to craft a meaningful life, just like you. Come with me on this way of the peaceful warrior, not the crazy badass, not even sure what the next day brings badass warrior, but the peaceful warrior that knows you will be taken care of. And you have every single thing inside of you to accomplish what's next in your life. And the only way to do that, the only way for me to live these trips and moving in, is to let go of being perfect. I originally had envisioned being packed perfectly for Europe, with the perfect outfit and shoes and jewelry and purse for every single day. You know that's not happening, right? I had to let go of that. I had to let go of taking one little bag of jewelry and one purse and whatever clothes are clean and hanging in my closet. And it's okay. I'm not there to showcase that I can dress well. I am there to spend time with John. I am there to create funds for Sapria. And that's enough. I don't have to be perfect. Yeah. I don't have to be perfect. I just need to show up. That's part of how I craft a meaningful life, is I just show up. But now I'm showing up for quality things and not quantity. I love having you with me in my life. I think about you all the time. Whenever I'm walking through life or looking at things and lessons, the whole time I was packing, I thought, oh, this is such a profound lesson for me. I want to share this with my listeners. I want to bring you along on a journey of how you might perceive your life. I could have seen this whole last month and this whole next month as an overwhelming struggle. I don't. I see how all these things are happening for me. And they're not happening to me. They're happening for me. And that's the gift I give to you today, that your life is ready to be crafted, to be the most meaningful life you've ever dreamed. And that is my wish for you today. Namaste.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.